I saw this School of Life quote recently which really struck a chord with me. You know you've had a happy childhood if you don't want to be famous. This got me really thinking that if you've grown up feeling seen, emotionally mirrored, and safe and secure in your identity, then you don't need a million strangers to acknowledge your existence. Michael Jackson became the most recognized human being on the planet, and yet spent his adulthood trying to rebuild the childhood he never got to live. Marilyn Monroe was desired by the entire world and wrote that she felt like a projection and not a person. David Bowie kept creating new identities because being himself never felt survivable. The unhappy creative child grows up thinking that fame will fix that hole inside of them, but it never seems to do so. This video is not about fame, it's trying to decode why anyone would want to be famous in the first place. It's about that timeline which turns a sensitive child into an adult which needs the public gaze to stabilize a sense of rejection which never seems to go away. I've spent my whole life, perhaps unsuccessfully, trying to be known and be acknowledged. And in today's video, I'm trying to understand why this feeling exists at all. Chapter 1. When love becomes conditional. We assume that the child who wants fame must have been deeply ambitious from childhood. But weirdly enough, I think nothing could be further from the truth. This child is actually a highly sensitive child. The kind of child who feels everything too deeply, who reads emotional shifts in a room instantly, who connects to music or images or even words in a way that seems physical. Linda Silberman's work on highly creative children shows the same cognitive baselines again and again. Heightened sensitivity, extreme empathy, and early self-awareness. This, in the right environment, becomes a gift. But when this nervous system develops inside an environment where love is conditional and attention is inconsistent, where differences are not understood, but in fact called weird or even mocked, this person's internal wiring starts to get attached to performance. This comes directly from John Bowlby's attachment theory, later expanded through the strange situation studies by Mary Ainsworth. The child learns, I am valued when I do something exceptional. In a performance-based environment, this child starts thinking that they need to be exceptional in order to receive love. You can see this in Stevie Wonder being a child prodigy before he was even a teenager. The applause came before the identity even formed. The world tells you what you are worth based on what you can do. And this is the moment I feel this equation forms quietly and permanently. Who I am equals what I can do and what I can give. And this child starts to grow up with one mission. I will become impossible to overlook. Chapter 2. The outsider and the inner world. There's a phase which arrives relatively early on in highly creative children, which is when they start to realize that their inner world is way more intense than the environment they're in. And this starts to develop into social isolation from an early age. Miraka Gross's research shows that the greater the inner complexity of a child, the harder it becomes for them to find friends or people to relate to in their immediate peer group. Imagine Freddie Mercury growing up as Farrokh Bulsara, culturally displaced and visually and internally a different boy. And that's where he started developing Freddie. When he realized that he as himself didn't fit into the world he belonged in, he started forming an identity which could perhaps move through it. It's a survival and a self-defense mechanism if you think about it. This is the moment where you start editing yourself to fit into an image which you think might be more acceptable on the outside. You try to lower your intensity and hide what you love. You start becoming hyper-aware of how you're perceived, and everything that you perceive as a flaw in you starts to become a problem. I think every person who's ever tried to become famous has a deep problem with their own self-image. And this is because their inner worth comes from outer approval. And at this point of time, your inner and outer timelines and worlds start to separate. Your outer life becomes functional, while your inner world remains real. And everything you build from here on is an attempt to reconnect them. Chapter 3. The I'll show them engine. By the time adolescence hits, this inner feeling of not being seen or understood turns into a kind of propulsion engine. This is where the work ethic, the perfectionism, and the obsessive tendencies we see a lot of famous people possessing start to appear. What looks like hunger and obsession to the outer world is psychologically just compensation for an inner wound which just seems to get bigger. Psychologically, this was explained by Alfred Adler's theory of compensation. When a person fundamentally feels inferior or unseen, they build excellence in another domain to rebuild their self-worth. So the drive may not be I want success. It might just be I refuse to be invisible. Think of Madonna arriving in New York with nothing and refusing to disappear. And her every reinvention in every era, every escalation is that same nervous system trying to stabilize itself through recognition and a refusal to be ignored. While you may fool yourself thinking that you're in the pursuit of greatness, what you're actually attempting to achieve is a sense of inner stability that you might have never known. And it works for a couple of minutes or so. Every milestone gives you relief, and every achievement gives you a temporary sense of existence. But because your sense of internal validation is coming from external metrics, it fades quicker than it arrives. Which is why this phase, I think, never seems to plateau or end. Nothing ever seems to fill that void inside you. And this void has existed for as long as you remember. Chapter 4. The Validation Addiction. Funnily enough, if you've done everything correctly, by the time you're an adult, this loop closes. And suddenly, you have an audience. And psychologically, I think this audience becomes an attachment figure. Jennifer Crocker's work on contingent self-worth shows that when identity is built through external validation, self-esteem becomes unstable and addictive. You're only okay when you are being seen. Kurt Cobain is the clearest example of what happens when recognition arrives but the internal structure doesn't change. He had total visibility and total cultural impact, but his private sense of disconnection got worse the more famous he got. It did not seem to heal, it did not seem to get better. Because fame only rewards your persona, which is the outer shell you've created to interface with the world. But it does nothing to heal the person inside, because that person inside has always felt worthless. The person inside feels that their sense of self-worth comes from metrics, from numbers, from views, from streams, from followers, from money. And this becomes like a drug you're addicted to. And like every drug ever, it creates more damage to your soul than ever fixing it. Each spike in metrics calms your body, and every drop escalates your sense of worthlessness. And this is because you learned early on that attention equals connection. And without attention, you yourself have forgotten who you are. I think fame cannot solve this attachment wound, which is why some of the most visible people in history have still felt unseen. The only way out of the loop. Sometimes I sit and think, what is the real thing a creative life needs? And I'm not sure the answer that we are seeking lies in the transition from being unknown to becoming famous. I think it's when we shift our sense of self-worth from external to internal validation. Self-determination theory by Deci and Ryan shows that sustainable drive comes from internal and intrinsic meaning rather than external rewards. And external recognition and internal stability are two completely different systems. And perhaps the real shift here is much simpler and much harder. It's trying to transition from please see me to this is how I see. It's in trying to accept who you are as you are, rather than seeing yourself as a reflection in the eyes of others. As silly as it sounds, it's in trying to fall in love with the version of you that exists when you want nothing from the outside world. Perhaps at this point of time, your internal nervous system may no longer be dependent on the gaze of the viewer. You're not creating to exist. You create from a place where you already do. So maybe the real question is not whether we want to be famous. The real question might be, what would your work look like if you already felt seen and loved? It's simple, but it may be the only way to fix the hole that exists inside of you and me. If you stayed for so long, thank you so much for watching. And please leave a comment and let me know why you think that people want to be famous and what is it inside of them that needs fixing. As a musician myself, I love sharing my songs with you. And here's a song I made recently that I'm really proud of, and I would love for you to check it out. And if you prefer more of these talking head style of videos, here's a video that I made recently that I think you might like. If you liked or felt anything, please leave a comment. I would love to connect with you.